The cold had settled deeper into the bones of the land as the night stretched on, a Christmas night so quiet it felt as though the world itself was holding its breath, and he stood there in the doorway of the hayloft unable to move, the lantern trembling in his hand as its warm glow revealed more than he had expected to find when he climbed the ladder to check on the livestock. The woman lay curled against the rough wooden wall, her coat too thin for the season, her hair dark and tangled, her face pale but peaceful in sleep, and cradled against her chest was a baby wrapped in frayed blankets, the tiny rise and fall of the child's breathing barely visible yet impossibly loud in his chest, as if each breath struck a bell inside him that rang with memories he had tried for years to bury, memories of another winter, another night, another helpless cry he had ignored. The hay beneath them was flattened and cold, and frost clung to the beams above like silent witnesses, and for a long moment he simply watched, his heart pounding not with fear but with something far more dangerous, recognition. Because he knew this kind of desperation, knew the look of someone who had nowhere left to go, and as the lantern light flickered he noticed the woman's hands, red and cracked, wrapped protectively around the child as though the world itself were a threat, and when the baby stirred and made the faintest sound, he felt something inside him fracture, a hard shell he had spent years building after the loss that changed him, after the bitterness that followed him like a shadow through every Christmas since, and instinctively he took a step back, telling himself this was none of his concern, that the world was full of suffering and he could not save everyone, that kindness only led to pain, yet his feet refused to obey, rooted to the floor by a force he could not name. The woman stirred then, eyes fluttering open, panic flashing across her face as she tightened her hold on the baby and tried to scramble backward, her fear sharp and immediate, and he raised his free hand quickly, lowering the lantern to soften the light, murmuring that he meant no harm, that she was safe, though even as he said the words he realized how long it had been since he truly believed such a thing existed, and she studied him with wary eyes, measuring his voice, his posture, the space between them, before exhaustion seemed to pull her back down and she slumped against the wall, whispering apologies he did not understand, apologizing for being there, for the mess, for existing at all, and that was when the last of his resistance gave way because no one should ever have to apologize for surviving, not on Christmas night of all nights. He asked her name and she hesitated before answering, as if names were luxury she could no longer afford, and when she told him, her voice cracked, and when he asked about the baby she looked down with a softness that cut him deeper than any blade, and in that look he saw love fierce enough to endure hunger, cold, and shame, and suddenly the barn felt too small to contain the weight of what stood before him, a crossroads he had never asked for but could no longer ignore, and as he offered her his coat, draping it carefully over her shoulders and the child, he felt the strange and terrifying sensation of warmth spreading through him, a warmth he had sworn he would never feel again, and though he did not yet know it, that simple act would unravel everything he thought he knew about himself, about loss, about redemption, and about the kind of miracle that arrives not with trumpets and light, but with a sleeping child in a hayloft and a choice that cannot be undone. And as the wind howled outside and snow continued to fall, covering the world in a fragile, temporary purity, he made a decision that would change the course of all their lives, a decision that would echo far beyond that night, and if this moment already has you leaning closer, feeling the pull of a story about second chances and unexpected hope, remember to subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because this is only the beginning, and what comes next will prove that sometimes the greatest miracles are the ones we almost walk away from. Morning did not arrive all at once but crept in slowly, pale light filtering through the cracks in the barn boards, turning the drifting dust into floating stars, and he sat awake on an overturned crate beneath the hayloft ladder, having not slept at all, listening to the soft sounds above him, the baby's quiet breaths, the woman's faint movements. As if they were proof that the night had not been a dream, that he had not imagined the weight that settled in his chest when he chose to bring them inside, and when the baby cried just before dawn, a thin, reedy sound that cut through the cold air, he climbed the ladder without hesitation, surprised by how natural it felt, how his arms moved with a certainty he had not known since before the tragedy that hollowed him out years ago, and the woman looked up at him with bleary eyes, fear flickering again until she saw his expression, something gentler than it had been the night before, and he offered to take the child so she could rest, the words tumbling out awkwardly, unsure, and when she placed the baby in his arms, his breath caught because the weight was almost nothing and everything at once, a fragile life wrapped in warmth and need, and the child's fingers curled around his thumb with astonishing strength, anchoring him in a way he had not been prepared for. He carried the baby down, warming milk on the small stove he had not used for company in years, and as the child fed and slowly calmed, he felt the past loosening its grip, memories surfacing not as knives but as echoes, reminders of what he had lost and what he had closed himself off from ever feeling again, and when the woman joined him, standing hesitantly in the doorway, he noticed how young she really was beneath the exhaustion, how her shoulders sagged under burdens far heavier than the child she carried, and over the simple ritual of feeding and warming hands by the fire, pieces of her story emerged, how she had fled an abusive home, how the baby's father disappeared the moment responsibility arrived, how shelters were full and kindness had been scarce, and how the barn had been a last resort, not chosen but endured. And he listened, truly listened, without interrupting or offering hollow reassurances, because he understood now that sometimes the most powerful gift was simply to bear witness, to say without words that someone mattered. Outside, church bells rang faintly in the distance, reminding him it was Christmas morning, a day he had avoided for years, yet here it was unfolding quietly, not in joy or celebration, but in something deeper and more enduring, and when he surprised himself by inviting them to stay, not just for the day, but until she found her footing. Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide, and in that moment he saw the same expression he had once worn, the disbelief that mercy could be real, and as the hours passed they shared a meal cobbled together from what little he had, laughter appearing shyly at first and then more freely when the baby hiccuped and sneezed, and with every small sound, every shared glance, the walls around his heart continued to crumble. Later, as snow melted into rivulets along the fence and the sun climbed higher, he stepped outside alone for a moment, breathing deeply, realizing that the emptiness he had carried for so long was not something to be filled by forgetting but by choosing again, choosing to open the door even when it hurt, choosing connection over isolation, and when he returned inside and saw the woman rocking the baby by the window, light haloing them both, he understood with startling clarity that this was his second chance, not to erase the past, but to let it lead him somewhere kinder, somewhere braver, and though the future remained uncertain, hard days still ahead, challenges yet unseen, he felt hope take root, fragile but alive, and as Christmas drew to a close and night prepared to fall once more, the house felt warmer than it ever had, not because of the fire or the walls, but because of the lives now woven together within it. And if this story has reached into your heart, if you believe in quiet miracles, in redemption born from compassion, then stay with us, subscribe to the channel, share this journey, and remember that sometimes one open door on a cold Christmas night can change everything, not just for those who enter, but for the one who opens it.